Having the last name Bernard means having a lot of courage. Understanding when things get tough, you don't back down, you don't tap out, you just continue to work hard. North Carolina has produced some really good running backs over the years, and even has had some first rounders in the last century, but no Tar Heel running back has had more hype going into his NFL career this century than Giovani Bernard. He was the best North Carolina running back in the past 30 years, and had the buzz to be one of the brightest young backs in the NFL. Despite never rushing for 1,000 yards in a season, or even having more than 5 rushing touchdowns in a season, Bernard has had a really solid NFL career, and after he was released today by the Bengals, I thought today would be a good time to take a look back at his college career and talk about what happened to him and if he is honestly an NFL bust. Today we'll talk about his rise, his time at North Carolina, and why he didn't live up to the hype coming out of college, or if he did. But first, if you want to support the channel, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to both this channel and my basketball channel, suggest what player or topic I should do next, and turn on post notifications so you never miss when I upload. Now let's get started and talk about what happened to Giovani Bernard. In order to get to this point, we have to talk about how Bernard became a star to begin with, and it was a tough start for his family. His father grew up in Haiti, and with him seeking a better life for his future, he decided to migrate to the United States on a small boat, and they had a very tough journey to get to Boca Raton, where he'd later settle. Him and his wife would work endlessly 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, to support themselves and the family members they still had in Haiti. They eventually were handed the keys to the cleaner shop that they worked at and would make a life for themselves. They'd have 2 sons, Giovanni and Vincent, and they both were great athletes. Gio remembers those years he'd spent living in Boca Raton, and that was a time in his life when everything was perfect, he said. They had a pool, a backyard, a mom, a dad, a brother, and a neighborhood full of friends. He had lucked out due to his parents' hard work, and the two could now focus on football. Sadly, their mother would die of thyroid cancer when they were in their young teens, and it was devastating for the family, and it was definitely a gut punch to him. The one saving grace for the family was Vincent's football scholarship to Oregon State, where he'd end up being the Beavers' second all-time leading rusher and is number 6 on the Pac-10's all-time list. Gio grew up and matured pretty quickly from it and took a liking to football a lot by now. He became an absolute star at St. Thomas Aquinas High School, and you could probably say his father, his background, and his work ethic helped him get to where he was on the field. He finished his career in high school at 2,603 rushing yards and 29 scores, and it could have been even more had he not missed most of his senior year with a hamstring injury. He helped lead the Raiders to a state championship in 2008 and a national championship in 2008 as well. He played with Florida State star LaMarcus Joyner while he was there, and both of them became big-time recruits. Gio was good enough that he actually originally committed to Notre Dame, and his high school coach said, quote, academics were important to him. He liked the atmosphere there, and I think he wanted to get out of this area. That wouldn't be his final school, though, or the end, as he would later decommit and re-examine his college options. He would later flip his commitment to North Carolina, and he had finally found his school. According to 24/7 Sports, Bernard was a 4-star recruit, the number 13 running back, and the 179th best player in the class of 2020. He was going into Chapel Hill with a lot of hype and a chance to play right away. He would arrive with the opportunity to play right away, as I just said, and that is what would happen. On the 3rd day of practice, he'd be thrown a major curveball, though, as he would tear his ACL trying to juke a defender, and just like that, he would miss the season and redshirt in 2010. He'd come back in 2011 on a mission, though, as he was named the starting running back. He became the first North Carolina running back to rush for at least 100 yards in 5 straight games since Ethan Horton in 1984. His season high would come against Georgia Tech, and he'd rush for 155 yards in that game. He'd become the best freshman running back in America, as he'd rushed for 1,222 yards and 13 scores, whilst having 300 yards and a touchdown in the passing game. You could say he had a lot of hype going into the 2012 season, and they had a new head coach in Larry Fedora, who would make the most out of him with his new spread-style offense. Fun fact, current Utah State and former Arkansas State head coach Blake Anderson was the offensive coordinator on the staff then as well, and I thought that was pretty interesting. Bernard became the best player on the team, and even started to return punts for the Tar Heels. One of them was a game-winning return against NC State, and this kid was an absolute star who could do everything. He led North Carolina in scoring for the 2nd year in a row and averaged 198 all-purpose yards per game, which was 3rd in the country. Overall, he finished the 2012 season with 1,228 rushing yards, 12 rushing touchdowns, 490 receiving yards, 5 receiving touchdowns, and 2 punt return touchdowns. Because of this, the head coaches in the ACC voted him a first-team All-ACC player, and he was 2nd in the Player of the Year and Offensive Player of the Year voting. The Heels would go 8-4, but could not go to a bowl game because of the sanctions from the Butch Davis era. He left for the 2013 NFL Draft and was projected to be a 1st or a 2nd round pick. He was the first North Carolina running back taken in the first 2 rounds since 1993, as he was taken with the 37th overall pick to the Cincinnati Bengals. He was the backup to Ben Jarvis Green Ellis for a bit, but would have a breakout game on Halloween night. He had 2 touchdowns and an overtime win against the Steelers, and Bernard had this to say, Quote, "I gave our dad a buzz right after the game, and for the first minute or so, I couldn't understand a thing he was saying. And he was just screaming in English and in Creole into the phone. Dad was just going nuts. He was like, oh my god, 2 touchdowns, 2? Can you believe it? He was seeing his American dream right there and all the work he had put in and all the sacrifices he had made for his son." Giovanni would have a great rookie year as he ran over 695 yards and 5 touchdowns, while also having 56 catches for 514 yards and 3 more scores as well. He was a young star in the NFL, but for some reason the Bengals didn't have faith in him as they took running back Jeremy Hill in the second round of the draft from LSU. Bernard was still the starter and actually had his first 100-yard game in early October against the Panthers, but he would miss a few games with injury and still managed to finish with 680 yards, 5 touchdowns, 43 catches, 349 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. He went into the next season as the backup to Jeremy Hill, but Hill would struggle and would later get beat out by Bernard once again, and the two would split carries. He helped them go for the largest comeback in Bengals history, and even got them to the playoffs, where he was injured by Ryan Shazier. He'd finished the season with a total of 154 rushing attempts for 730 yards and 2 touchdowns, while also once again becoming a factor in the passing game as he caught 49 passes for 472 yards in 16 games. He had another solid 2016 season, but he got hurt in November, and then going into the 2017 season, the Bengals had drafted Joe Mixon to be his replacement, it seemed. His numbers would drop the next 3 years, and going into the 2020 season, it seemed he was on his way out, but credit to him for still churning along as he impressed. This past fall, showing he could still contribute, but as of today, April 7th, 2021, he was released by the Cincinnati Bengals. He played 8 years for the franchise and would rush for a total of 3,690 yards and 22 touchdowns, while catching 342 passes for 2,867 yards and 11 touchdowns, and you could say he had a really solid career. So what happened to him, and would you consider him a bust? Well, no, I would not call him a bust at all, as he had a great NFL career and he had a lot of great moments. People hoped he'd be a 1,000-yard running back 1 type guy, but that was just not him, and he wasn't tall or built enough for that, and he made up for it in the passing game as he was a guy who could do a lot of damage out of the backfield. He may not have had eye-popping numbers, but he was solid and consistent every year, and I hope he finds another team where he can contribute. But after 8 great years, I wouldn't be surprised if he hangs up the cleats and calls it a career. Another thing that isn't talked about enough is that he still kept fighting even though he was always being replaced. Jeremy Hill was drafted right after he did well, and Joe Mixon was drafted once again. But the man never gave up and just kept working like he had always done and like his family had taught him. He was definitely a superstar at North Carolina and has one very inspiring story we can all learn from, so I'm glad I took the time to take a look at his story today, as I really didn't know much about him before this. But what do you guys think? What do you think of his career? What do you think is next for him? And who should I do next? Be sure to let me know down in the comment section. And before you go, hit that like button to support this video so more people can see it. Subscribe to this channel, my basketball channel, if you have not already. Suggest what player I should look at next. And check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video about how Mack Brown is building a monster at North Carolina. I hope to see you guys again soon. But until next time, peace.